on in this thing and begin chapter 4. And here we're still dealing with Moses and God. And God had appeared to him in the burning bush and had told him in Exodus chapter 3 and verse 9, "Therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come unto me, and I have also seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppressed them. Come thou therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." And so we find that, in a sense, Moses here is given a great commission, isn't he? Go deliver my people out of bondage. You know, in parallel today, we're given the great commission, aren't we? You know, when we turn over there to Matthew chapter 28, we find that Jesus told his disciples this. He said in Matthew 28:18, "All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things I have commanded you, and lo, I'm with you even unto the ends of the world." So we have a great commission given unto us today. Not unlike Moses. Moses was going to go deliver people out of bondage, wasn't he, physically? Today, people are delivered out of bondage by the word, aren't they? And we're going to talk just a minute that Moses used a tangible object, a stick or rod, which is made out of wood, to deliver the people. Today, the rod is God's word to deliver people. So we're still looking at types and shadows and analogies in all this. And I may have to pause for just a few seconds. I've kind of gotten guilty as anybody else. I only got my laptop back up and running just a few minutes before we got here, so I've had some problems with it. So as you can see, a lot of this is going to be ad-lib today without notes, so which is okay if I don't get off in a tangent. We know it's Daniel and Reed's responsibility that if I get sidetracked, y'all are to correct me and say, "Bobby, you got to get back to the lesson," okay? That's why I went to using notes to try to stay on track. So anyway, we'll see how this goes, and anything that we miss, we'll cover next week. So anyway, we find that Moses is given this great commission. And of course, the angel of the Lord had told him when Moses asked, "Who shall I say sent me? I am had sent you." And we talked a good bit about that and a good bit about Jesus using the I ams when he done his teaching. So we find that this I am denotes all power, all greatness, all goodness. I am before, I am even in existence after the end. Now, when we think about after the end, there is not going to be any end to eternity. It's after time that we know it. So I am exists before, and I am exists afterwards. So God does not have a battery source, if you will, to power his might, is what he's getting at. Really what he's saying here, I exist by my own power and by my own authority. And we have a hard time, that's a hard concept for us because we know anything that has power is subject to have a power supply source, isn't it? Fuel, diesel fuel, gasoline, battery powered, solar power. God's not like that. He exists without any aid or help from anyone or anything, and yet he is the power source to all life as we know it on earth physically, and also we know even more importantly spiritually. And so we're going to see that Moses is given this great commission to go, and he didn't come out of the box very strong with it, did he? He was like a lot of other characters that we've talked about in the Bible when they were given commissions by God to go. It's going to take a little bit to get him jump-started to go and do that, And so we find here in chapter 4, beginning at verse 1, "And Moses answered and said, But behold, they will not believe me, nor will hearken unto my voice, for they shall say, The Lord hath not appeared unto me." And so, after Moses is seen all this, he's seen the burning bush, he's been spoken to by Jesus out of the burning bush, and God has already told him that he is going to be with him to do this. What do we see Moses start to respond? Moses saying, But behold, they're not going to believe me, now will they hearken my voice? For they will say, The Lord hath not appeared unto thee. And so we find that we see Moses is coming out the gate really with somewhat of some unbelief in it. When you stop and think about the human aspect of it, this would kind of be a natural state, wouldn't it? We've seen something unusual. Moses has seen the burning bush. He's seen Jesus speaking to him in Mount Sinai. And of course, now he's being given the directive, you go deliver up to 3 million people or more out of Egypt. Kind of overwhelming, isn't it? So we see the human aspect of this also, that God is using Moses' human side to do his will. Once he gets the human side convinced and convicted, guess what that does to the spiritual side? It's a done deal, isn't it? And so this is what we're working on here. And so he said that, they're not going to believe me. And so we find the Lord is going to start developing some faith in the grand scheme of things. It's in small things that we're going to see here. But in our eyes, these are great things too. But in the eyes of Moses, the grand scheme of things, these things are going to be small indeed. And that's the way God works. He uses small things to develop our faith so we can work in big things, okay? And that takes some time. And so we find, and the Lord said unto him, what is in thy hand? And he said, a rod. A rod's in my hand. This is not unusual for Moses to have maybe had a rod in his hand. We know he was going to be in line for the throne of Egypt, and we know that the rulers at that time, especially the pharaohs, carried these long golden scepters that they used to rule the people. Okay? And so we find that Moses at one time either may have had, because of his rank in the Egyptian civilization, or was in line to inherit the throne of Pharaoh and the ruling rod of Pharaoh. And yet we find God talks about Moses having a rod in his hand. And we're going to look down through here that we're going to find that this rod that Moses had really is what we would call a shepherd's staff maybe today, because he was a herdsman. So what was a shepherd's staff be made out of? Wood. So, wait a minute, are we starting to see a picture that God's not going to use a golden rod? He's not going to use the tangible things of man. He's not going to use something that man looks at as glorious and spectacular. You mean he's going to use something made out of a piece of wood? You know, when you take a look and think about the use of this rod in the cross of Jesus Christ, the cross of Christ was not made out of gold. It was not made out of silver. It was made out of part of God's creation. And we're seeing that the armies of God are using things that God has created in his army, and a lot of times we refer to that as nature. And those are the things that he's going to use. He's not going to use chariots. He's not going to use horsemen. He's not going to use warriors. But he's going to use what is available to him that he created in power and might. And this is what he wants Moses to see. It's a way of developing faith, isn't it? It's what it is. God does not operate like we operate. My thought might have been, we talked about Barak. My thought might have been right off the bat, okay, Deborah, you're going to go with me, so I've got enough courage to go. If I get killed, you're going to get killed too. My first thoughts would probably be what? How many men can I get together? How many tanks can I get together? Is there any nuclear weapons available for my use? Do I have enough ammunition? That's man, isn't it? That would be my thoughts on it. That's not God's thoughts. God doesn't need that, okay? Can you imagine what would happen? A massive army, and it's all its power and pomp is assembled at the borders of God. Let's just say, we're just using this as a hypothetical example to paint a picture, all lined up with all the bombs and missiles and nuclear power and things of that nature available. Everybody in that army is ready to go, many thousands, hundreds of thousands, and God sends a swarm of yellow jackets. Now, who you think going to come out in that one? A swarm of yellow jackets. Can you imagine, Jeff, God sending hundreds of thousands of yellow jackets? He don't have to fire a shot, does he? How about some of them guinea walls? That'll get folks' attention, wouldn't it? You know, and this is what we're going to see Moses doing. God is going to use his natural army, if you will, to defeat a world power, a world superpower. So, and really, what's he going to use? A rod. Think about that. A rod. A shepherd's staff. That just shows you the power of God. And we're going to find in Exodus chapter 4 and verse 20, as I look on down through here, this rod is going to become known as the rod of God. You know, you have the rod of Pharaoh, don't you? And now we got the rod of God. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And notice what he tells Moses to do. It's kind of interesting at Moses' reaction. Now, I'm going to tell you about Moses' reaction and what's going to happen to this rod. Now, Brother Con, his reaction is just like my reaction going to be. Okay? I said Moses' reaction to that rod turning into a snake going to be just like what my reaction would be. Run. Okay?
Get out of his way.
That's what I'm saying.
He said
Okay.
Moses fled.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think we ever noticed that when we look at this a lot of times. You know, that Moses, his faith is not nowhere near where it's got to be. Matter of fact, we're still seeing, I won't say signs of total unbelief, maybe total disbelief, okay? But you're operating in that arena, you see. And he told Moses to cast it on the ground, and he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent. Well, two things that a lot of us are afraid of, and myself included, is electricity and snakes. You know, both will bite you, and you may not ever see them. So, you know, I run from both, especially them kind of crawl. So anyway, what did Moses do? Moses fled, didn't he? He was surprised. Wait a minute, you know, and that would be my response, you know, and so we can still see unbelief operating in the thought pattern and mind of himself. You know, he hasn't really grasped this power of God yet, and it's going to take a little bit for him to do that. And I'll pause for just a second. Any of you brethren have a comment you want to make on that? Okay.
Faith come in Moses when he reached down.
Do what now?
Faith come in Moses when he reached down and grabbed the tail of that snake.
That's where we're going. You're right on target. That's where I'm headed. You're right on target. And so notice what it says here. And the Lord said unto Moses, put forth thy hand and take it by the tail. And what did Moses do? See, now Moses has got a choice to make right here. Okay? This is an intersection really in Moses' life. Moses could have said, like a lot of times when the gospel presented, oh, I'm not going to do that and walk away. Or Moses can do what God commanded and obey. So let's see what he's going to do. He's got a choice to make. This is really, these signs here, these first two signs are really a crossroad in the life of Moses. He's really reaching a point to where he's going to have to make a choice to turn left or to turn right, okay? Now let's see the decision that he's going to make. And he put forth his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand. Don't you know that had to be a sign of amazement? For him to reach down and pick that serpent, it says up here by the tail, and it turned back into a rod. You know, that had to be startling within itself, you know, for that to happen. And so we find that here God is working here, like I said, on Moses' unbelief. And the Lord said unto Moses, put forth thy hand, and he did. And notice why he was doing this. These are aids to faith, if you will. Aids to faith. That they may believe the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Jacob, and the God of Isaac hath appeared unto thee. So here again, these were going to be signs to confirm who Moses was. What did we see as we studied in the book of Acts with the develop and start of the genesis of the church? We seen signs and miracles going with them to confirm the word, didn't we? To confirm who they were. To show the power of God in a physical form to get their attention in the spiritual form. And so we find that this is why these things was being done, that they may believe too. Well, what happened when the apostles and all were going about teaching the early gospel, and well, what was happening to the populace that they went into? Well, signs were being performed, wasn't it? People were being healed. We know, like Cornelius spoke, and the Holy Spirit appeared unto Cornelius, and all these things went on. And we read in the book of Acts, and most of the time it makes what statement does it make? And many believed. And many believed. So this is why this is being done. And now we're going to get another sign. This is an interesting sign here too. It has to do with pollution of the heart, really, and we'll talk about that after we read about it. And we'll kind of do a quick review on these signs. And the Lord said furthermore unto him, Put now thy hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, the hand was leprous as snow. So we're going to find now that God is going to do another miracle for Moses to help build his faith. He said, stick your hand into your bosom, and when he pulled it out, it was leprosy. Now, you know, leprosy back then was a very prominent disease, wasn't it? It was getting up there kind of to the top of the list, wasn't it? It was everywhere. Maybe kind of like some of our cancers today. You know, it was a very dreadful disease. As a matter of fact, we're going to find when the law comes into being that that's one of the things commanded of a leper person was to holler, unclean, 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 so nobody would come in contact or get close to him. In a sense, we just went through that ourselves, didn't we? And it's still somewhat called COVID-19, isn't it? You know? So we still apply some of that same thought pattern today about certain diseases and having contact with certain things. The best doctor for it's got to stay away from it, isn't it? Okay? To try not to get it. Same principle applies. And so we find that Moses put his hand in verse 7 again, and he brought forth his hand out of his bosom and plucked it out of his, and behold, it turned again as other flesh. So he stuck it back in there. This is another miracle. That goes directly against the course of nature, doesn't it? God had the power to cure these diseases. So what is all this getting at? We talked about pollution. God was using this to get the pollution or the dirty content or the impurity out of Moses' heart. And so he's using these things to take doubt away, is what he's doing. You know, really, you can look at the first sign, the use of the rod by the pharaohs has a sign of military strength. So what God was showing Moses in that first sign, that by my power and that by my way, your enemies are going to be made powerless. That helps take away doubt, doesn't it? Even though, what did God say in Exodus chapter 3 and verse 12? Certainly I will be with thee, and this shall be a token unto thee that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, you shall serve upon this mountain. Certainly I will be with thee. Now, what does God do? He's showing Moses that he has the power and authority over creation, over disbelief, over pollution. I've got power and authority over anything they can throw at you, Moses. Look at what I've done right here just in this short period of time for you. And this is being done to dispel disbelief. Now, this third sign about the river becoming blood, we'll go ahead and just kind of lump it in here because there were 3 signs here. That has to do with judgment. So what's God showing Moses? I have the power and authority to net out judgment. And this is how I'm going to do it. So Moses is dealing with 3 aspects here. He's saying that the enemies of God would be made powerless, that God is going to take doubt out of his heart and mind, and also that he's going to net judgment on his enemies. And we know all 3 of these things are going to come to be, aren't they? They're going to come to fruition. Just like God said he was going to be with him. And it shall come to pass, if they will not believe thee, neither hearken to the voice of the first sign, that they will believe the voice of the latter sign. So we find God is saying, well, if they won't believe this and they won't believe that, maybe they'll believe this. You know, sometimes it's hard when you're talking to people to get through to them about the gospel. Sometimes you have to approach it from several different ways in order to try to get through it. You're trying to find what clicks in their mind, okay, to help them understand what you're trying to do. You know, just because you tell someone to repent, confess, and be baptized, that's not a successful magical key, is it? Sometimes you have to teach maybe from this side or this side, and it all comes back to that anyway, doesn't it? You got to get them to see the need for God in their life to lead to this, okay? So it's real interesting when we talk about that. Let's see where I'm at here. And it shall come to pass, verse 9, if they will not believe, also these two signs, neither hearken unto thy voice, that thou shalt take of the water of the river, pour it upon dry land, and the water which thou hast taken out of the river shall become blood upon the dry land. And so we find that this third sign was going to be a powerful sign where Moses is going to take water out of the river, pour it upon dry land, and it's going to become blood. That shows power and authority over judgment. Because when you see the shedding of blood, what does that normally denote? Judgment. And this is what we got here. So we have Moses being shown by God and told by God the confirmation, if you will, verbal form to begin with. Physical form has a second to fulfill verse 12. Certainly, of chapter 3, I will be with thee. I will be with thee. You know, when you turn back over here to Matthew 28, notice what Jesus said at the very end of the Great Commission. What did he say? I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Same thought, isn't it? Certainly, I'm going to be with you. That's the same promise in our commission today. We know that this was a physical commission given to Moses, but today our commission is spiritual in nature. But the principles that were set in motion over here in the beginning, and we are still in a sense in the Genesis formation. Really, you could say that we're going to be in the Genesis formation of this thing until we get to the law of Moses installed, really, because you're seeing principles and practices that's going to become part of the law still being laid down. Such as, you know, we talked about very briefly Exodus chapter 3 and verse 22 about they're going to take the jewels and silver and gold and things like that when they leave Egypt. Well, that was God's plan to make provision for them in the wilderness. That's true. But what are we not seeing? Maybe a shadow of what was going to become a part of the law. Here again, you're in the early infancy still of all this. You know, you turn to Deuteronomy chapter 15, verses 12 through 14. There was wages to be paid to a slave for years of hard labor. That was part of the law. So are we not seeing a picture or type of this? They had been in all this bondage for all these years, and all these bad things had gone on, and now all of a sudden they're going to be rewarded by those very things they helped build. And that's going to be done, you know, to help them have provision. And we know God's going to take care of them. He's going to give them manna and quail and things and water and things of that nature. But there are things, though, that we have to do for ourselves still. Somebody had to go pick the manna up, didn't they? Somebody had to go draw the water, didn't they? You know, somebody had to prepare the manna. You had other things going on in this. And we think about this in this sense. Where else do we see things of value and tangibility being brought as an aid to God's people? Think about the birth of Jesus. He was born into a poor family, born in a stable. That part of it, of the Christmas narrative, that's pretty much correct. There's some tweaking there, but it's pretty much correct. And when the wise men from the east came about a year and a half later, and visited Jesus in the house he was living with, what did they bring? They brought tangible things of the world, didn't they? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So what was the point of that? Why did God make that provision? Well, God knew that they were going to have to need a way to survive as they fled from Jerusalem and go into Egypt. That's God's providence at work. God made the provision. Now it was going to be up to Mary and Joseph to do what with it? Use it for their necessities, what? Because those were things of value. Okay, so you can see the providence of God at work in all of this. This is what you got to remember. You're seeing His hand at work in all of this. And, we find that just as Moses had to flee, Jesus had to flee, didn't he? So anyway, I'll pause again. Do you brethren got anything you want to add, subtract, multiply, divide?
I'll say that this, miraculous signs, all of these signs are miraculous.
Yeah.
And they're for the benefit of showing Pharaoh God's power.
Yeah.
And finally, he might finally decide to do something. That's what God wants him to do, is let his people go.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he wants them to also know who Jehovah is.
Right.
We'll take that up just a little later.
Sure.
He definitely I am.
Yeah, definitely.
Because he didn't used to be, don't have any plans to will be, but he is present. I am.
Right. I am.
And that's a good thought to carry with you, because you take these questions he's asking, when he gets down here, I was looking right there where he said, Moses began to make a little excuse, by his mouth.
Yeah,
He asked him, who made the mouth?
Yeah.
Who made your mouth? Who makes the blind eyes see, and who makes the deaf ears hear?
Yeah.
You just go ahead, I'll be with you.
Yeah. All God said was go, didn't he?
Yeah, you go ahead and I'll be with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a hard concept for us, really.
Yeah.
Because we're used to, when we get ready to go, what do? A lot of preparation, don't we? Okay? He just told him to go. I'll take it.
One time over there in Matthew somewhere, when Jesus was telling them, he said, when they bring you up before these rulers and counselors and all, so don't be thinking about what you're going to say. It'll be given to you in that hour, what
Right.
you shall say.
Right, you just go. I'll take care of it. Yeah.
Now that's faith.
That's faith.
Waiting and
That's
letting
right.
God operate.
That's
giving
right.
God a chance to operate.
That's right. That's right. And so we find that Moses in verse 10, we're going to get still more working in this unbelief or disbelief category. Moses is seeing that God's not going to they won't believe me for an answer. Okay? Now what's he going to do? He's going to try to find an excuse not to go out front, isn't he? What's he going to say? Notice what he says here. And Moses said unto the Lord, I am not eloquent, neither heretofore nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant, but I am of slow speech and of slow tongue. It seems as though Moses, he was educated in the philosophy, science, literature, mathematics of Egypt, wasn't he? So we know he had some worldly skill sets there. Now, how much of these worldly skill sets had he lost sight of when he became a shepherd for 40 years? And how much of this that he had a physical impairment of something, we don't know. All we know is that what he's doing here, he says, I'm of slow speech and slow tongue. We do see that Moses doesn't have any self-confidence. That's what that deals with, self-confidence. He said, I can't do this. And he had been out there, and basically, one commentary, I can't remember who it was, might have been Barnes, I'm trying to remember, said that, well, what happened to Moses is he lost somewhat of that polish of Egypt because he'd been talking to sheep for 40 years. Now, I don't know, I thought that kind of smirked and kind of grinned, and it's like, okay, but maybe the point is, maybe he had lost some of it being out in the wilderness desert like that in Mount Sinai, But he's trying to find a good excuse not to go. And what he's really saying is, my speech is not what it ought to be, which is saying my self-confidence is not what it should be. And I think we find that too, when we go into the Gospels and we go over and we find self-confidence does play a big role in being able to do this, doesn't it? Where does that confidence building come from? We just talked about it. God commanded, he said go, and he said in Matthew 28 as well as here, I will be with you until the ends of the world. Well, see, faith begins to do what to confidence? Build it, doesn't it? It begins to build it spiritually. Now, we may not have much confidence when it comes to all these rudiments and all these things that go on in the world, okay? But we can have enough spiritual confidence of where we can teach the Bible and teach the gospel and deliver people out of bondage. That we know, can't we? We can have that. Matter of fact, just to be honest with you, my confidence in a lot of things that the world has is not that great, okay? Especially as it gets more modernized, okay? But that doesn't mean we can't have spiritual confidence. We want God's rod. And, when you look at this, when you take a look at it, what is, and we briefly mentioned that, but it's in in Exodus chapter 4 and verse 20, what is God's rod today? The Word. That's his power. That's how he operates. That's how everything moves. That's how everything flows. That's how everything goes. The writer of Hebrews, in Hebrews chapter 12, Hebrews chapter 1, the first couple of verses, said that God did many things in many ways at various times and all in the past, didn't he? With the fathers and prophets. And he did. But he says, I think it's the second verse, has spoken to us in these last days, the church era, the Christian dispensation, if you will, by what? By his dear Son. So who is the rod today? The Son. The Word. So where do we find the Word? The Son. Well, there's never one place to find it, in the Bible. That's the only place we can find it, is in the Bible. So we find that we too today, in a spiritual sense, carry the rod of God. That's a powerful thought when you stop and think about it, Brother Conn, at what we have available as Christians. The power that we have. We don't stop and think about it. But we do. We carry that. We have a very powerful rod indeed. And notice, and so Moses now is questioning his self-confidence. Did he actually have a speech impairment or whatever? Myself looking at how some of the others in the Hall of Fame of Faith and how they got started and what was going on in the life of Japheth and, in the life of Gideon and all of them, kind of tend that he probably did, but now I can't say that in absolute certainty. We know whatever it was, it impacted his self-confidence, okay? And it seemed like this may be geared more toward that. Just like the other guys, they had stuff that was interfering with their self-confidence when they were given a big command. So, and this is done to teach us that don't let that imperfection, if you will, whatever it may be, stand in your way. The guy is he's in a denomination, unfortunately, but I have seen him speak, and he's kind of a motivational speaker. When he was younger, when he was a baby, he was actually brain dead for 7 minutes. And when he come out, when he came to, he has a lot of physical defects. But when you listen to him talk and give God the glory for what has happened in his life, it really tears you to the heart and think, now here this guy's got all these physical disabilities and stuff like that, can't hardly stand, shakes, can't hardly speak. And yet what he's doing there is, in his way and his thoughts, giving God the glory. And you think, well, I got both my feet, I got both my legs, I'm reasonably healthy. What's wrong with me? You know? When you stop and think about it, these excuses that we use a lot of times is just that. What Moses was trying to do is just that, isn't it? Is those excuses, right? So anyway, notice what we're going to do here, and I need to ring that buzzer. And the Lord said unto him, who hath made man's mouth? Or who hath made it the dumb or deaf or the seeing or blind? Have I not the Lord? So he's telling Moses here, Moses, don't worry about that. I made all this. I created all this. Am I not in control of man's mouth? Am I not in control of man's hearing? And therefore go. There it is again. God didn't say, well, you know, I hear your excuse, and, you know, when you get ready, you kind of make up your mind, and you think about it, and maybe next month we'll have a board meeting on the subject, and then 6 months from now we'll still be talking about the same. What did God say? God said, go. You know, really what you're looking at here, what he's telling Moses, in verse 12 of chapter 4, is what we just read in the Great Commission of Jesus, didn't it? Jesus said, go. He said, go. He said to go. Now therefore go. And I will be with, okay, now I'm going to stop right there. What did Jesus tell the apostles and disciples that he was going to do? He was going to be with them until the ends of the earth, didn't he? He said, through all trials and calamities, no matter where you go, through the good times and bad, I'm going to be there. Well, in this particular case, it's looking at the good times and bad with Moses, but we know physically it's looking at something in particular here. He said, now therefore go, and I will be with thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say. So you know this lack of willingness and self-confidence is seen in Moses, but the Lord is saying, wait a minute. You go, and I'm going to take care of the rest of it. Moses wanted someone else to go. You know, we make that statement. Well, why don't somebody? Daniel, we used to have a little signs there in our offices about different things. And when people come talking about, well, somebody need to do this and somebody need to do that, we'd hand them this little sign that says, you are somebody. That gets attention. Okay. Well, you're somebody. What's keeping you? Your hands aren't tied. There's no rope to your feet. Matter of fact, you'll be fulfilling some corporate instructions that you've been given, dictated from above, if you go do, right? So anyway, but that's the way Moses was, you know, send somebody else. But God's not interested in somebody else. God is interested in us. And so he says, therefore go, I will be thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say. And he said, O my Lord, send, I pray thee, by the hand of whom thou wilt send. And we just talked about that. You know, send somebody else. You know. And so we find in verse, where am I at? Verse 14, and the angel of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, is it not Aaron the Levite? I know that he can speak well, and also, behold, he cometh forth to meet thee. And when he seeth thee, he shall be glad in his heart. So we're finding, you know, God said, no, I'm telling you, Moses, you need to get up and go. This conversation is about to come to an end, okay? I done give you my commands. I done demonstrated my power. I done made a promise to you. You know, in our way of saying, what else do you want? He said, you better go. So you can tell that God is getting a little bit upset with Moses here. And he said, anyway, I got this thing worked out. Look at Aaron, your brother. He can speak good. Let him do the speaking. You know? He's of the tribe of Levi. Said, if you just go and be the leader, you know, kind of like he's the second in command. He'll be your commander-in-chief, okay? In a sense, he's saying, you go and you be the front man and you do what I tell you to do, and I'll let Moses pick up the rest. So I'm going to send you out here with that. I've got this worked out. And here, God is talking to Moses one-on-one. I'm about to close this, okay? Mount Sinai to burning bush, they're one-on-one. God gives a piece of prophecy here that's going to happen here in just a little bit, okay, to Moses. Notice what he tells him about Aaron. Behold, he cometh forth to meet thee, and when he seeth thee, he will be glad in his heart. And we're not going to get to that because I'm going to have to stop. But when you turn over here, you're going to find that Aaron did come to Moses in the mount, like God told him he was going to be coming to you. And you'll see this as we close out this chapter. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. So anyway, we'll stop right there at verse 14, and we'll get ready for the worship service.